Once upon a time in the dry desert lands of New Mexico, the sun beat down on the earth, baking it until it shimmered like a mirage. It was the 1860s, and the land was wild, untamed, and mostly unknown. There were a few small towns scattered here and there, but for the most part, it was just empty desert and rugged mountains. In this harsh environment lived a lonely woman. Her name was Evelyn Carter. She was a widow who lived far from the nearest town in a small wooden house. Her husband, Thomas, had died in a skirmish years ago, and since then she had lived quietly by herself. She grew her own food and survived each day with nothing but her strength and patience. Evelyn wasn't a young woman, but she was tough as the desert itself. She knew every inch of her land, every twist of the stream, every rock and cactus. And she used this knowledge to survive. She collected rainwater and stored it in barrels, enough for her and her animals. She grew vegetables in a small patch by the stream, and she had a few chickens that scratched around the yard. She also had a dog, an old hound she called Scout. He was her only companion, and they understood each other without a word. Scout slept at her feet at night, and during the long days, he followed her like a shadow. One afternoon, the sun blazing in the sky, Evelyn decided to go to the stream behind her house to collect some more water. The stream was a small one, no more than a few feet wide, and it meandered through the rocks like a silver thread. It was a lifeline in the desert, providing water for her animals and crops. As she walked along the bank, she suddenly noticed something strange. Near the water lay a man, his clothes torn, his arm bleeding, and he seemed barely conscious. Evelyn stopped dead in her tracks. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. It was a man, a real-life man. And not just any man, but a Navajo warrior, one of the fierce natives who lived in these parts. Everyone in town had warned her about them. They were known to be dangerous. They raided homes, stole cattle, and hurt people. Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. She could run back home and lock herself inside. No one would ever know. But as she looked at the man lying on the ground, something inside her, some deep-rooted instinct, perhaps told her not to walk away. She took a step forward, then another. "Hello?" She called out, her voice echoing in the vast emptiness. The warrior's head turned slowly. He looked at her with tired eyes, his face painted with intricate patterns of red and blue. In his hand, he clutched a bow and arrow. Despite his wounded state, he looked dangerous. He tried to speak, but his throat must have been dry from thirst, because only a hoarse croak came out. Seeing his condition, Evelyn's heart went out to him. She had no idea if he was a good or bad person, but right now he was hurt, and that mattered more. Carefully, she poured some water into a tin cup she had brought with her and knelt beside him. "Drink," she said softly. The warrior looked at her for a moment, then nodded slowly. He drank the water in small sips, and after a while, he seemed a bit more alert. With some effort, he sat up. Evelyn watched him, not knowing what to do next. Then she realized she needed to tend to his wounds. She ran family. She carefully cleaned his cuts with water from the stream and wrapped them up with pieces of cloth. The warrior winced when she touched his arm, but he didn't seem to protest. After she finished, he looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and wariness. Evelyn knew she couldn't leave him here. She brought him back to her shed, laid him on some hay, and gave him some bread and beans. Then she stayed up all night watching over him. She didn't sleep much, but she kept a fire going and made sure he was okay. All night, she kept asking herself why she was doing this. She knew the stories about the Navajo, how fierce and merciless they could be. Yet here she was risking her own safety to help him. Was it foolish? Maybe, but Evelyn couldn't bring herself to regret it. She had seen fear in the warrior's eyes, yes, but also pain and exhaustion. He wasn't a monster, just a man. As the first light of dawn touched the sky, Evelyn fell asleep in a chair by the fire. When she woke up, the warrior was gone. She searched for him, calling his name, but there was no answer. She found him outside by the stream. He was kneeling, washing his face. "You're awake," he said, looking at her. He still seemed tired, but there was a new strength in his eyes. "I am," she replied, surprised by her own calm voice. She had expected fear, but there was none, only curiosity. "My name is Evelyn," she said, offering a hand. The warrior hesitated, then took it. His grip was strong, and she could feel the calluses on his skin. "Tassa," he said, his voice hoarse but kind. Evelyn wanted to ask him more, to understand who he was, but she knew it was time for him to go. She led him back to her yard, where her dog, Scout, was waiting. When he saw Tassa, he let out a low growl, but he didn't move. Evelyn stroked his head. "It's all right, boy," she said. "He's all right." Tassa looked at Scout, then back at Evelyn. "Thank you for helping me," he said. "I owe you my life." "Don't mention it," Evelyn replied. "I just couldn't leave you there." She paused. "Where are you going?" "Home," he said simply. "To my family." He drew his bow. "If you need anything, just ask," Evelyn said. "What do you want?" In response, Tassa did something unexpected. He smiled, revealing teeth stained black by the arrow. "You will see," he said, and with that, he disappeared into the bush. Evelyn stood there watching him go, her heart pounding. What had just happened? Was she really about to be visited by an entire tribe of Native Americans? Just then, she heard a commotion in her chicken coop. She rushed over and found one of her hens pecking furiously at the ground. As she looked around, she saw something incredible. Nestled in the hay was a pouch made from leather and beads. It was tied tightly, but the hen had managed to loosen one of the knots. Curious, Evelyn untied it completely. Inside, she found a pile of dried meat, a few loaves of bread, and something else, a small, intricately carved wooden box. She opened it and found a necklace made of turquoise stones and silver. Each stone was unique, a beautiful shade of blue-green, and they were set in a pattern that she recognized from Tassa's arm. The bracelet matched the pattern on his arm. Could this be a sign of respect? A thank you from Tassa himself? Evelyn felt a surge of emotion. She had risked her life to save Tassa, but she had never imagined that he would remember her. She put on the necklace, feeling its weight against her chest. It was a heavy, meaningful piece of jewelry. Just then, Scout started barking fiercely. Evelyn froze. Here we go, she thought. She ran to the gate and opened it just as Tassa and several men rode into her yard. They were all dressed in buckskins and feathers, and their faces were painted in vibrant colors. They were all armed with bows and arrows, and their eyes were sharp and intense. Behind them stood a group of women and children. They, too, stared at Evelyn with unwavering intensity. Evelyn's heart raced. She had never seen so many Native Americans at once, and their stares were unnerving. Tassa rode forward and leaped off his horse. He walked toward Evelyn, his eyes intense. "Evelyn," he said, his voice echoing in the silence. "I am honored to have you as our guest." Before Evelyn could respond, a woman stepped forward. "She is family now," Tassa said, placing a hand on Evelyn's shoulder. The crowd gasped. Evelyn was stunned. "Family," she repeated, unsure if she had heard correctly. "We are grateful for your kindness," the woman said, bowing her head. "We are Navajo. We come in peace." Evelyn felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had feared the worst, but it seemed that Tassa and his people weren't here to harm her. They were here because of her act of kindness. From that day on, Evelyn's life changed. The Navajo became her protectors, bringing her food and warning her of any danger. She was no longer alone in the vast wilderness. Instead, she was part of a community, a family she never thought she would have. The Navajo taught her their ways, how to track animals and read the stars, and she shared her knowledge of the land with them. They respected her wisdom and experience, and together they formed a bond that was unbreakable. Years passed, and Evelyn never forgot the day the Navajo arrived at her doorstep. She knew that her life could have taken a very different turn that day. but she chose to help Tassa, and it was one of the best decisions she ever made. As the sun set over the desert each evening, casting long shadows across the land, Evelyn sat on her porch, surrounded by her Navajo family. She was no longer a lonely widow. She was part of something bigger, something that gave her a sense of belonging and purpose. She was part of a tribe that had become her family,